Welcome to our journey through one of the most inspiring and heartwarming stories in the Bible, the story of Ruth. Imagine a tale of unwavering loyalty, redemption, and divine providence that has captivated countless hearts for centuries. Ruth's story is not just a historical narrative, it is a story of hope, courage, and the beauty of faith. Today, we invite you to explore this incredible journey of a young Moabite widow who, through her faith and determination, found her place in the lineage of Israel's greatest king and ultimately in the lineage of Jesus Christ. Join us as we delve into the events that transformed Ruth's life from despair to joy and discover how her journey still resonates with us today. In the time of the Judges, Israel was a nation caught in a cycle of disobedience and redemption. The people strayed from God, suffered oppression, cried out for deliverance, and were saved by judges raised by God, only to fall back into idolatry again. This vicious cycle repeated itself many times, reflecting both the frailty of human nature and the enduring mercy of God. During one of these turbulent periods, a severe famine struck Israel, leaving the land barren and its people desperate. With the fields withering and hope fading, a man named Elimelech made the difficult decision to leave his homeland in search of sustenance for his family. Elimelech was from Bethlehem, a town whose name meant house of bread, yet ironically, it had no bread to offer during the famine. Alongside him on this journey were his wife, Naomi, and their two sons, Mahlon and Chilion. This small family set out to Moab, a neighboring country that bore a complex history of both kinship and conflict with Israel. The Moabites were descendants of Lot, and their relationship with the Israelites was often fraught with tension, marked by periods of both war and uneasy peace. Despite this, Elimelech saw no other option but to take his family to Moab, hoping they could find food and safety there. In this foreign land, tragedy soon struck. Elimelech died, leaving Naomi a widow in a strange country, far from her people and her God. Naomi, now faced with the burden of raising her sons alone in a land that was not her own, continued to persevere. Her sons, Mahlon and Chilion, eventually took Moabite wives, Orpah and Ruth. These marriages were unconventional and likely raised eyebrows, for the Israelites were discouraged from marrying those outside their covenant community. However, in a time of famine and displacement, these unions represented both a blending of cultures and a means of survival. For Naomi, her sons' marriages brought a sense of continuity and hope that perhaps life in Moab could still hold blessings, but sorrow visited them once more. After about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also passed away, leaving Naomi and her daughters-in-law bereft and vulnerable. In the ancient world, widowhood was synonymous with vulnerability. Without the protection of a husband or sons, a widow faced a precarious future, often reliant on the charity of others. For Naomi, the weight of her losses was immense. She had left Bethlehem full with a husband and two sons, and now found herself empty, with neither family nor security. In her grief, Naomi decided to return to Bethlehem, having heard that the Lord had ended the famine and provided food for his people once more. Naomi prepared to make the arduous journey back to her homeland, but she knew the road ahead would be difficult, especially for her daughters-in-law. She urged Orpah and Ruth to return to their families in Moab, to seek new lives and perhaps find new husbands. Naomi's words were filled with both love and resignation. "May the Lord show you kindness, as you have shown kindness to your dead husbands and to me. May the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband." Orpah, after much weeping and hesitation, eventually agreed to return to her family, kissing Naomi goodbye with tears in her eyes. But Ruth refused to leave Naomi's side. In one of the most poignant and moving declarations in Scripture, Ruth said, "Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God." Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me." Ruth's loyalty was profound, marking a complete break from her past and an unwavering commitment to Naomi's people and her faith. This moment of commitment wasn't just a vow to Naomi, it was Ruth's wholehearted acceptance of the God of Israel despite the uncertainty of what lay ahead. It was an act of courage, love, and faith that would forever change the course of her life. The journey from Moab to Bethlehem was a challenging one, nearly 50 miles on foot, traversing rugged and often unforgiving terrain. Naomi, worn down by grief and loss, must have leaned heavily on Ruth for support, while Ruth, stepping into an unknown world, pressed forward with determination. Ruth's decision to stay with Naomi was not just an emotional attachment, but also an act of deep faith in a future she could not yet see. Together they traveled, each step echoing with the pain of their losses and the hope of new beginnings. Upon arriving in Bethlehem, the entire town was stirred by Naomi's return. The women of Bethlehem, who had known Naomi from before, were shocked at her appearance and the emptiness in her eyes. "Can this be Naomi?" they asked, hardly recognizing the woman who had left with her family years before. Naomi, whose name meant pleasant, responded with a heart full of bitterness. "Don't call me Naomi," she told them. "Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty." Naomi's words were a stark reflection of her grief and disillusionment. She felt as though God's hand had turned against her, stripping away everything she held dear. Though Naomi's heart was heavy, Ruth remained by her side, steadfast and hopeful, embodying the very loyalty and love that Naomi had inspired in her. Their arrival in Bethlehem coincided with the beginning of the barley harvest, a significant detail that hinted at providence and provision. The harvest season was a time of hope and renewal, and it marked the beginning of Ruth and Naomi's journey toward restoration. Ruth, seeking to provide for herself and Naomi, took advantage of the Mosaic law, which allowed the poor and foreigners to glean in the fields, gathering the grain left behind by the harvesters. This law was a provision from God, designed to ensure that even the most vulnerable in society could find sustenance. Ruth's humility and determination led her to a field owned by Boaz, a man of standing from Elimelech's family line. Boaz was a wealthy landowner, respected in the community for his integrity and generosity. He was also a relative of Naomi's late husband, which would soon prove to be a crucial connection. As Ruth worked tirelessly in the fields, her dedication did not go unnoticed. Boaz arrived from Bethlehem to oversee the harvest and noticed the young woman gleaning among the workers. He inquired about her, and the overseer replied, "She is the Moabite who came back from Moab with Naomi. She asked to glean and gather behind the harvesters. She has worked steadily from morning till now, except for a short rest in the shelter." Boaz was moved by Ruth's diligence and the loyalty she had shown to Naomi. He approached her and spoke kindly, saying, "My daughter, listen to me. Don't go and glean in another field, and don't go away from here. Stay here with the women who work for me. Watch the field where the men are harvesting, and follow along after the women. I have told the men not to lay a hand on you, and whenever you are thirsty, go and get a drink from the water jars the men have filled." Ruth's response was one of deep humility and gratitude. She bowed down with her face to the ground and asked, "Why have I found such favor in your eyes that you notice me? A foreigner?" Boaz replied, "I've been told all about what you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, how you left your father and mother and your homeland and came to live with a people you did not know before. May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." Boaz's words were a powerful affirmation of Ruth's character. Through her loyalty and tireless work, Ruth had come to symbolize faith in action, and Boaz's blessing acknowledged her courage and devotion. Boaz continued to show Ruth generosity. He invited her to share a meal with his workers, personally serving her roasted grain, a gesture that showed honor and acceptance. He discreetly ordered his men to leave extra stalks of grain for her to gather, ensuring that her efforts would be rewarded abundantly. By the end of the day, Ruth returned home with an abundance of barley, far more than would be expected of an average gleaner. When Naomi saw the amount of grain Ruth had brought back, her heart began to hope again. She recognized God's providence in leading Ruth to Boaz's field. For Boaz was not just a kind benefactor, but also a kinsman redeemer, a close relative who had the legal right to redeem family land and care for widows. This concept of the kinsman redeemer was a provision in the Mosaic law that ensured the protection and continuation of a family line, and Naomi began to see the possibility of redemption for both herself and Ruth. Naomi, determined to secure Ruth's future, devised a plan. She instructed Ruth to wash, put on her best clothes, and go to the threshing floor where Boaz would be that night. The threshing floor was a place where the harvested grain was separated from the chaff, and during the harvest season it was common for landowners like Boaz to sleep there to protect their produce. Naomi's plan was bold, for it required Ruth to approach Boaz in the dead of night, after he had eaten and lain down to rest. Ruth was to uncover his feet and lie down, an action that was culturally appropriate as a way for Ruth to signal her desire for Boaz to take on his role as her redeemer. It was a vulnerable and courageous act, especially for a foreigner in Israel, but Ruth trusted Naomi's wisdom and God's provision. In the stillness of the night, Boaz awoke, startled to find Ruth at his feet. The threshing floor, usually a place of labor, had become a scene of intimate vulnerability. When he asked who she was, Ruth replied, "I am your servant Ruth. Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a guardian redeemer of our family." This plea was both a marriage proposal and a request for protection. By asking Boaz to spread his garment over her, Ruth was invoking a symbolic act that represented a commitment to care for and protect her. Boaz, moved by her gesture and recognizing her loyalty, praised Ruth for not pursuing younger men, whether rich or poor. He saw in her a woman of noble character, and he was honored by her request. However, Boaz was also a man of integrity, and he knew there was another relative who had a closer claim to redeem Ruth. He promised to do all she asked, but first had to ensure that the proper procedures were followed. Before dawn, Boaz sent Ruth away with 6 measures of barley, a generous gift to ensure she would not return to Naomi empty-handed. When Ruth recounted the events to Naomi, Naomi assured her, "Wait, my daughter, until you find out what happens, for the man will not rest until the matter is settled today." Naomi's confidence in Boaz's integrity was well placed, and the anticipation of Ruth's future hung heavily in the air. The next steps would determine whether Ruth's courage and loyalty would be rewarded with the security and love she so deeply deserved. The following day, Boaz went to the town gate, where legal matters were settled in the presence of the elders. The town gate was the center of public life, where transactions were made and justice was administered. Boaz waited for the closer relative to pass by, and when he did, Boaz called him to sit with the elders as witnesses. Boaz presented the situation clearly. Naomi was selling a piece of land that belonged to their relative, Elimelech, and as the closest relative, this man had the first right to redeem it. Initially, the man agreed, seeing it as an opportunity to expand his own holdings. But when Boaz mentioned that redeeming the land also meant marrying Ruth to maintain the family line, the man hesitated. He realized that marrying Ruth and raising a son in Mahlon's name could complicate his own inheritance, and so he declined, saying, "I cannot redeem it because I might endanger my own estate. You redeem it yourself." In the presence of the elders, he removed his sandal, symbolically transferring the right of redemption to Boaz. Boaz joyfully declared his intention to redeem both the land and Ruth. He proclaimed before all, "Today you are witnesses that I have bought from Naomi all the property of Elimelech, Kilion, and Mahlon. I have also acquired Ruth the Moabite, Mahlon's widow, as my wife, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property, so that his name will not disappear from among his family or from his hometown." The elders and all who were present blessed Boaz and Ruth, invoking the memory of Rachel and Leah, who built the house of Israel, and praying that Ruth would be like them. The blessings spoke of fruitfulness, legacy, and the continuation of a family line that would have lasting significance. Ruth and Boaz's marriage was soon blessed with the birth of a son, Obed. The women of Bethlehem rejoiced, telling Naomi, "Praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a guardian redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age, for your daughter-in-law, who loves you and is better to you than 7 sons, has given him birth." Naomi, once empty and bitter, now held a grandson in her arms, her joy and hope restored. Obed would become the grandfather of King David, establishing a lineage that would ultimately lead to Jesus Christ. Ruth's journey from a foreign widow to a beloved matriarch is a testament to the power of faith, loyalty, and God's providence. Her story shows that God's grace extends beyond cultural boundaries, and He can use anyone, regardless of their background, to fulfill His grand purpose. Ruth's loyalty to Naomi, her boldness in approaching Boaz, and her trust in the God of Israel transformed her destiny and secured her a place in the lineage of the Messiah. Her life is a powerful reminder that God often works through ordinary people and seemingly mundane circumstances to bring about extraordinary redemption. With Boaz's declaration at the town gate, Ruth's fate was sealed, and the second chapter of her story began, one not of uncertainty and loss, but of restoration and hope. After Boaz redeemed the land and took Ruth as his wife, their marriage brought joy and new beginnings not only for themselves, but also for Naomi, who had endured so much grief and heartache. Ruth, a woman once marginalized as a Moabite outsider, now found herself fully embraced within the community of Bethlehem and celebrated as part of Israel's lineage. She had moved from a state of despair to one of hope, from the uncertainty of gleaning in fields to the security of being welcomed into a new family and a new future. The wedding of Ruth and Boaz was a joyous occasion for the entire community of Bethlehem. Friends, family, and neighbors gathered to celebrate this union, which symbolized more than just the joining of 2 individuals. It represented the blending of 2 cultures and the hope of new beginnings. The townspeople who had watched Ruth's journey from a widowed foreigner to a cherished member of their community rejoiced alongside Boaz and Naomi, blessing the couple with prayers for prosperity and fruitfulness. The joy of that day was palpable, with laughter, dancing, and the warmth of shared hope filling the air. The blessing of the elders comparing Ruth to Rachel and Leah underscored the magnitude of this union. Ruth, once a stranger, was now fully part of the story of Israel, with a legacy that would stretch far beyond her lifetime. Ruth and Boaz settled into their life together, and soon Ruth conceived. When she bore a son, they named him Obed. This child was more than just a blessing to Ruth and Boaz. He was a living symbol of God's faithfulness, His ability to turn mourning into dancing and bring fullness where once there was emptiness. The birth of Obed brought profound joy not only to Ruth but also to Naomi. The women of Bethlehem gathered around Naomi, their voices filled with wonder and praise. "Praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a guardian redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age, for your daughter-in-law, who loves you and is better to you than 7 sons, has given him birth." The words of the women carried deep significance. For Naomi, who had once lamented that she returned home empty, Obed's birth was a sign that God had not abandoned her. He had indeed seen her suffering and responded with blessings that surpassed her earlier losses. Holding Obed in her arms, Naomi experienced a profound renewal of hope, a healing balm for the wounds of her past. No longer did she see herself as empty, for through Ruth, God had filled her life anew. Naomi's role in Obed's life was not just that of a grandmother. She became a nurturing figure who helped shape his early years. The love she poured into raising Obed was a testament to the restorative power of God's grace. The once bitter woman who had asked to be called Mara was now a joyful caregiver, her life renewed through the unexpected blessings that God had bestowed upon her. Obed would grow up in the loving care of Ruth, Boaz, and Naomi. He would be cherished not only as their son, but as a bridge between two cultures, a symbol of reconciliation and divine purpose. Obed's childhood was likely filled with stories of his heritage, tales of resilience, faith, and God's providence. He would hear about his mother's bravery in leaving Moab, her loyalty to Naomi, and her courage in embracing the God of Israel. He would learn of Boaz's kindness, his willingness to go beyond the letter of the law to show love and compassion, and his role as a redeemer. These stories would have shaped Obed's understanding of what it meant to live a life of faith, integrity, and service to others. In time, Obed became the father of Jesse, who would become the father of David, Israel's greatest king. This genealogy is not merely a list of names. It is the unfolding of God's plan, weaving together the lives of people who, by worldly standards, might seem insignificant. Yet each person, Ruth, Naomi, Boaz, and Obed, played an integral role in the divine tapestry that led to the birth of the Messiah. As we reflect on Ruth's story, we see the transformative power of steadfast love and faith. Ruth's unwavering loyalty to Naomi, her courage to embrace a new faith and culture, and her humility in seeking Boaz's protection are qualities that transcend time and culture. Ruth's journey began in Moab, a land often seen as an enemy of Israel, but her story concludes in Bethlehem, where her descendants would ultimately bring forth the Savior of the world. This journey illustrates that God's grace is not limited by borders, ethnicity, or past mistakes. His grace is available to all who turn to Him in faith. Ruth's inclusion in the lineage of Jesus is a powerful reminder that God's love and redemption are available to everyone, regardless of their background or origins. Boaz, too, exemplifies profound integrity, compassion, and obedience to God's law. He was not obligated to redeem Ruth. Rather, he chose to, driven by love and respect for her character and loyalty. In Boaz, we see a foreshadowing of Jesus Christ, the ultimate Redeemer. Just as Boaz redeemed Ruth and Naomi, restoring their place in the community and giving them hope for the future, Jesus redeems us from the power of sin, offering us new life and a place in God's family. Boaz's willingness to take Ruth under his wing and provide for her echoes the promise of God's protection over those who seek refuge under his wings. His actions were not just about fulfilling a legal duty, they were motivated by a deep sense of compassion and love, reflecting the heart of God Himself. The community of Bethlehem also played an essential role in Ruth's story. Their acceptance of Ruth, blessing her union with Boaz, and celebrating the birth of Obed show the beauty of a community that embraces others and shares in their joys and sorrows. Their words to Naomi after Obed's birth, "Your daughter-in-law who loves you and is better to you than 7 sons," underscore the value they saw in Ruth. Though she was a foreigner, her faithfulness elevated her in their eyes. This acceptance by the community reminds us that God's family transcends cultural and social barriers, inviting everyone to be part of His plan. The willingness of the people of Bethlehem to welcome Ruth and recognize her worth speaks to the power of community in God's redemptive work. It challenges us to be a people who see beyond differences, who value faithfulness and character, and who open our arms to those who seek refuge among us. Ruth's story is one of hope restored, love rewarded, and faithfulness honored. It teaches us that no matter how dire our circumstances may seem, God is at work behind the scenes, orchestrating events for our good and His glory. Ruth, an outsider with seemingly little to offer, became the great-grandmother of David, from whose lineage Jesus Christ would come. Her life stands as a testament to how God uses those whom society might overlook to fulfill His purposes. Through Ruth, we learn that our background does not determine our destiny. Rather, it is our faith and our willingness to follow God's leading that shapes our future. Ruth's journey from a foreign widow gleaning in the fields to the mother of a child who would carry on the lineage leading to the Messiah is a powerful reminder of God's ability to transform our lives in ways we could never imagine. Naomi, who began the story in bitterness, found herself surrounded by the warmth of love and the promise of a future. Her journey from sorrow to joy is a reminder of God's ability to bring beauty from ashes. Naomi's life, once characterized by loss, became a testament to God's restorative power. Her grandson, Obed, would become the grandfather of King David, and her faith journey would be a pivotal part of the unfolding story of redemption that God was writing for His people. Naomi's transformation from Mara back to Naomi symbolizes how God can change our identity from bitterness to joy, from emptiness to fulfillment. Her story teaches us that even when we feel that all is lost, God is still at work, bringing about a future filled with hope and promise. As Obed grew, the story of his mother and grandmother would have been shared with him time and again. He would learn of the courage of his mother, who left everything familiar to follow Naomi to a foreign land. He would hear of the kindness and generosity of his father, Boaz, who went beyond what was required by law to demonstrate love and compassion. Obed would grow up knowing that his life was a testimony to the power of love, faith, and the providence of God. His life would carry forward the legacy of faithfulness that began with a Moabite woman's courageous decision to follow the God of Israel. Obed's upbringing would have been deeply rooted in the values of loyalty, kindness, and devotion to God, values that would ultimately influence the generations that followed, including his grandson David. The lineage that began with Ruth and Boaz continued to unfold in remarkable ways. Their great-grandson David would rise to become a shepherd king, a man after God's own heart, who united Israel and led the nation with both strength and humility. From David's line, generations later, would come Jesus of Nazareth, the fulfillment of God's promise to bring salvation to the world. Ruth's faithfulness, Boaz's kindness, and Naomi's resilience were all threads in the intricate tapestry of God's redemptive plan for humanity. Each decision they made, each step they took in faith, contributed to the story of salvation that would impact all of history. The significance of their choices reverberates throughout the ages, reminding us that our actions, no matter how small, can have a lasting impact on the world around us. Ruth's story resonates deeply because it is a story of ordinary people caught up in extraordinary divine purposes. There were no grand miracles, no parting of seas or voices from heaven, just the quiet, persistent faith of a young widow who chose love over fear, the integrity of a man who acted with compassion, and the providence of God, who turned mourning into joy. Ruth's story encourages us that even when we cannot see God's hand at work, He is weaving our lives into His greater story. It is a reminder that God often works through the ordinary, the mundane, and the seemingly insignificant acts of love and kindness to bring about His extraordinary purposes. The simplicity of Ruth's story is what makes it so powerful. It shows us that God values the everyday acts of faithfulness and uses them to accomplish His grand design. For those who have ever felt like outsiders, Ruth's story is a beacon of hope. It shows that God's love knows no boundaries and that He invites everyone, regardless of their origin or past, to be part of His family. Ruth, the Moabite, became a part of the lineage of Jesus Christ, the Savior of the world. Her inclusion in the genealogy of Christ, as recorded in the Gospel of Matthew, is a powerful statement of God's inclusive grace and His desire for all nations to come to Him. It underscores the truth that in Christ there is neither Jew nor Gentile, but all are one in Him. Ruth's journey from an outsider to an essential part of God's plan demonstrates the inclusive nature of God's kingdom, where all are welcome and valued. The story also speaks to the power of community. Ruth found herself embraced by a new people, and through their acceptance, she was able to flourish. The blessing spoken over her by the elders of Bethlehem, comparing her to Rachel and Leah, shows that her worth was fully recognized and celebrated. It is a reminder to us of the importance of welcoming and embracing those who come into our lives, of extending grace and kindness to those who may be different from us, and of recognizing the potential that God has placed in each person. The community's role in Ruth's story challenges us to be a people who build others up, who celebrate acts of faith and courage, and who participate in God's redemptive work by creating spaces of belonging and love. Boaz's role as the kinsman redeemer not only brought hope and security to Ruth and Naomi, but also serves as a beautiful foreshadowing of Jesus Christ, our ultimate redeemer. Boaz acted out of love, willingly taking on the responsibility to restore what had been lost. In the same way, Jesus took on the burden of our sin, redeeming us and restoring our relationship with God. Boaz's actions pointed forward to the time when Jesus would come to redeem humanity, to gather those who were far off, and to bring them into the family of God. Through Boaz, we see a glimpse of the sacrificial love that Christ would demonstrate on the cross. Boaz's willingness to redeem Ruth, despite the potential complications, reflects the selfless love that Jesus has for each of us, a love that is willing to pay the ultimate price for our redemption. As the years passed, the story of Ruth, Boaz, and Naomi would become part of the collective memory of Israel, a story told and retold to remind the people of God's faithfulness. It was a story that taught lessons about loyalty, kindness, and the importance of faith in the face of uncertainty. It reminded them that God is always at work, even in the most difficult circumstances, and that He is capable of transforming sorrow into joy. The legacy of Ruth and Boaz lived on not only through their descendants, but also through the example they set for future generations, an example of how to live with integrity, compassion, and unwavering faith. Their story became a testament to the enduring power of love and the transformative nature of God's grace. The book of Ruth ends with a genealogy, a reminder that Ruth's story was not just about her, it was part of something much larger. Her faithfulness had far-reaching consequences that she could never have imagined. The same is true for us today. Our choices, our acts of kindness, our steps of faith, they all have the potential to impact generations to come. Ruth's story challenges us to trust in God's plan, even when we cannot see the full picture, and to believe that He can use our lives in ways that exceed our understanding. It calls us to live with the kind of faith that steps into the unknown, confident that God is at work even in the details we cannot see. In the end, the story of Ruth is a story of redemption, of God taking what was broken and making it whole, of turning despair into hope, and of using the most unlikely people to fulfill His purposes. It is a story that calls us to live with faith, to act with love, and to trust in the Redeemer who has promised to restore all things. Ruth's legacy is one of courage, compassion, and unwavering faithfulness, a legacy that points us to the ultimate Redeemer, Jesus Christ, through whom all our stories find their true meaning and fulfillment. Ruth's life, once marked by loss and uncertainty, became a beacon of hope that continues to inspire us today, showing us that God is always at work, weaving our lives into His grand narrative of redemption. We hope Ruth's story has touched your heart as much as it has inspired us. The journey of Ruth, Naomi, and Boaz is a powerful reminder of God's faithfulness, love, and ability to bring beauty from ashes. What lessons have you taken away from this story? We'd love to hear your thoughts and reflections in the comments below. If you enjoyed this exploration of Ruth's journey, don't forget to like this video, share it with friends, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories from the Bible. Thank you for joining us, and may you be blessed as you walk in faith and love, just as Ruth did.